This is ArtsAlive. I'm Lynda Philippi. My guest today is Joe Silva, and Joe's here to talk to us about the project that he's going to be directing in Portland in September called The Telling Project. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's so nice to be here.
Well, when I met you, we talked about the fact that you're going to be directing a play at Gallery Theater here in McMinnville in January. But prior to that, you have a really compelling project, I think.
Yes, The Telling Project in Portland.
So for people who are not familiar with this at all, and I know it's sort of a national thing, do you want to just tell us about the Telling Project?
Sure. The Telling Project is, as you said, a national program. It's already been presented in 17 cities around the country, and each one is a different performance with different individuals. But the idea behind it is to get together a group of veterans, male or female, regardless of branch of service. But the rule is it has to be the real person telling their real story. And there's an interview process in which these folks are identified, and then the interviews are transcribed word for word, flaws and all. And a presentation is pieced together typically with 5 or 6 veterans telling their stories. Now the Portland one, of course, we're special. We have 9.
Oh, okay, so, great. Yeah.
So we're going to have more, and they're all very rich, different stories. But the idea is to bring together the community and the veterans, because in fact they're really quite separate. And we've had 14 years of continuous war now, which is the longest in our history. And through all those years, only about 1% of the population has actually served in any capacity. This is very different from any other war at any other time. And there's a separation now between our service people and the people they serve or the people they defend. And what's going on now is that they come home and they have, in many cases, a very, very difficult transition, because any form of military service will transform you. I can tell that. I can tell you that firsthand. I was in the Air Force for 4 years, and I had a cakewalk, but I wasn't the same person that left. Had I experienced some of the traumatic experiences that these individuals had experienced, I know it would have been extremely difficult to come back and try and assume some sort of normalcy to my life. So the idea of the Telling Project is to give these individuals a forum so that they can talk. And the people that come, you would think that there are other veterans, but it actually turns out the civilians take an interest in this, and they come and they learn so much about what it is like to go into the service, what boot camp is like, what their deployments were like, what their traumas involved, and how that impacts their ability to come back into, quote, normal society. So it's very, very rich. It's very real, it's very deep, and it's just been a pleasure to work with these individuals. We're just kind of gearing up this last 3 weeks or so, and they're all so different, but they're all such cool people.
So tell me a little bit about how you became involved. You personally became involved with this project.
Oh, well, about this time last year, I wrote a short play called Circling the Drain. And it has 3 little sections, even though it's very short. It's got 3 distinct sections. And the middle section involves a recollection of a battle scene. This was picked up by a public access TV station in Gresham. So last September, we went out there, and I had 3 performers, and they did my show.
Okay.
And again, it was called Circling the Drain. And one of the producers knew one of the producers of The Telling Project. And so I had met them both in that process, and when this came around, which is the second time for Portland, they were saying we need a director, and I guess they both thought of me.
That's great.
Yeah, so the phone rang, and I was so happy to hear about it, because it's such an exciting project.
Who funds this project? Who's behind the whole thing?
The Telling Project is, what do you call it? It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It was started by Jonathan Way, who lives in Austin, Texas, and he's the executive director and the founder. So this was his brainchild, and he's brought it to great fruition. He's a joy to work with.
And where will this take place?
This will take place at the Brunish Theater in Portland. It'll be September 10th through the 13th.
Okay, and presumably there's a website.
There is a website. You can go to thetellingproject.org.
Okay.
And you can find out all about the Telling Project as an entity and all the details about all the shows.
Now, the people who are, well, I don't want to call them actors, but the veterans,
Yes.
are they all veterans, or some of them active duty? What's the mix?
We have at least one that is still active duty. The others are retired or out. I have one who is not a spouse. She's a significant other of somebody who is deploying probably today. I think he's going.
Oh my goodness,
yeah,
okay.
He's been in Texas for the last couple of months, getting ready to deploy again. He's Oregon National Guard. And I think today or real soon he's going back to Afghanistan to assist in the withdrawal.
So do you have people from every branch of the service?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the Telling Project has had people going all the way back to World War II. Although my understanding is it's been primarily Vietnam and forward veterans.
And so when this is set up kind of almost you said sort of semi-stage, but like a reader's theater. I know you brought some photographs in. Maybe we can go ahead and run those from some of the previous productions.
Sure.
Just to let people have an opportunity to see.
Sure.
So they're just regular people in regular clothes.
That's right. The staging is very simple. To give the power of the stories room,
Sure.
to not distract from that. But you can see, in this case, there's 2, 4, 6, 8 folks. I can tell you this was the last Portland one because I recognize one of the individuals.
Okay.
But they come in, and each show is staged a little bit different. And when we get into it, I'm going to find some ways to make our show, I won't say more interesting, but it needs to be staged somehow.
Sure.
So that'll be my job. And but it is truly individuals standing up and telling their story. I can tell you the one that we have is going to have at least 2 women in it.
Okay.
This time. And yeah, this will just give you an idea of the format.
Okay.
So here's another one, in this case a female performer.
Well, one of the things I like about this, having them just in regular street clothes, is it does sort of make the point that when you're anywhere, all the veterans are among us, they live among us, they work among us. Everybody doesn't come home and wear their uniform and march down the street. They're
right.
trying to reintegrate into the regular society, into the families and the lives they left behind, but with such vastly different experiences. I'm sure that's really challenging.
And it is so important that we know that they're there, and that we know who they are and what they did. I'm a baby boomer. I was born right after World War II. And I did not know until late in my 20s that the people that surrounded me growing up had fought in World War II. And they certainly had their stories. There was no notion of anything like PTSD or any such thing at that time.
Of course not.
So they came home and they put their heads down and just knuckled their way through it. But I have no doubt that they suffered as much as any of our soldiers from Afghanistan or Iraq have suffered. They did not have something like the Telling Project. They didn't have such wonderful VA assistance, counseling, and hospitals and so on. It's important to know who these folks are while they're here with us and among us.
You're absolutely right, and I think about for example, the people who fought in World War II. By and large, they weren't raised to talk about their feelings, and they weren't raised to be sensitive men. And we've worked so hard for all these generations to try to create, these sensitive boys who grew up into men who could talk about their feelings, and then they come home, and we better be prepared to deal with that.
It's still impossible because we're not prepared to hear it.
Right.
And they're not prepared to tell it. There's no forum, not a public one. I mentioned I was surrounded by people who had been in World War II. My stepfather was a combat medic in Korea, he was in the middle of it all the time, and he never talked about it, but it emerged in other ways. And it wasn't until well into my adult years that I had any kind of an understanding of the things that he had to do, the things that he had to see, and the things that he continued to live with for the rest of his life. And by the way, today's the 5th anniversary of his passing, so it's an honor to be here talking about him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was not a guy who could tell you about it. He's not a guy who could put his feelings on the table. We're better at that these days, but we're still not good at it.
And like you say, people have to be prepared to hear that too.
That's right.
Without making judgments or, deciding, making your mind up in advance about how you feel about something. You just have to be willing to hear the story.
That's right. And if you open your ears, you'll learn things like one of the things I've learned is what it must be like to be a spouse or a significant other of somebody who not only deploys once, but for some reason wants to go back again and go back again. What are the dynamics there? That's really hard to understand. What's the impact on the children when daddy goes back and daddy goes back again?
Oh.
And what's the impact on the family? And the relationship? It's
so
fascinating.
This is interesting that you bring that up because my brother was in Desert Storm, and when he was gone, his youngest son stopped growing. He just stopped growing, and he had sort of failure to thrive. And it took a lot. Basically my brother had to come home before he was okay to, kind of resume his life. Yeah, it was, I forgot about that till just now. Really serious.
How many years was he gone?
Oh, he wasn't gone years. It wasn't years.
Just a year or a month or something like, yeah.
But, even now, some of these people, they've got deployments to Afghanistan, to Iraq, back to Kuwait, to Korea. I mean, they're gone and gone and gone, or multiple deployments. And you think, what does that do to a family? That's really interesting.
Yes. And children, I don't care, from the time they're an infant, I learned with my son that children know way more than we ever give them credit for. They pick up more than we ever imagine they will.
Of course, they do, that's for sure.
And I think that was a fine example of that.
Wow, so the people that you have then, by and large, are they living in the Portland area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Portland, Beaverton, surrounding areas.
Okay.
Not very far. Most of them not very far. I think one of them is 20 or 30 minutes north.
So this is something that then you don't do, you record their stories, you kind of craft the presentation a little bit, but they're essentially coming in and telling their own story a few times over the course of this weekend.
Well, we're gonna rehearse at least twice a week. I'm putting a lot of miles on my
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
because I come from down south.
Sure.
And I'm committed to putting in whatever they need to get their confidence going and to feel good about that they're going to do a good job of being themselves.
Sure, right, exactly. To present like you say, and so that they can actually get through it.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for being here. I can't wait to see this production. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. You're more than welcome.
And we'll have you come back and talk about Sylvia in the fall.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay.